The President. Good morning. Members' motion without binding effect, developing venues and creating room to support the development of local culture, arts, recreation and sports. Members who would like to speak on the motion, please press the request to speak button. I will invite Mr. Ma Fung-kwok to speak and move the motion. Mr. Ma Fung-kwok. Thank you. Mr. President, I move the motion as printed in the agenda. Mr. President, the government has just started a big debate on land supply. Members of the public are concerned about identifying land to address the shortage in housing supply. Housing is, of course, a priority of the government, but at the same time, it is necessary to create a quality living environment for cultural, arts and recreational activities, not to mention that they can contribute to our economy, and it is also a symbol of soft power. There should be space in support of the development of arts, culture and recreation sports. We must admit that over the past few years, the government has been making effort. In 2008, the government approved the funding application of $26.1 billion to create the West Kowloon Cultural District. Following that, further injections of funds were made. And last year, the funding application of $39.1 billion was approved to build the Kai-Tak Sports Complex, and $20 billion were reserved to repair and maintain and build more arts and cultural facilities. But I want to emphasize that apart from the WKCD and Kai-Tak Sports Complex, these efforts seek only to make up for the shortage that we have for a long time. Well, since the year 2000, there has only been the addition of one venue for cultural arts and sports, whereas our population increased from 6.6 million to 7.4 million last year. The WKCD's commissioning could meet the high-end demand for arts, culture, and recreation, whereas for these activities in general, the government should work harder. Over the past years, there has been a steady growth in the number of local cultural, arts and sports groups, be it exhibition venue or sports or education venues. The demand is on the rise. However, because of soaring rental and problems with the revitalization of industrial buildings policy, there has been a long lack of venues and rooms, and for these venues, the booking rate is over 80%. Whereas for some venues such as City Hall and Cultural Center, the utilization rate exceeded 100%. And despite the some 23,000 applications, over 80% of the groups were not allocated venues, and the average utilization rate reached 85%. As for sports grounds, the utilization rate reached 99%. Sometimes vigorous biddings were needed for the public to use the venues. According to a survey, only 24.7% of respondents agreed that there are sufficient sports and cultural venues nearby, and over 80% of respondents agreed that very often they could not successfully hire a venue of the LCSD. And in fact, some of the venues do not meet the existing Hong Kong PSG. And the last review of the Hong Kong PSG was over 20 years ago, and many of these facilities are aging rapidly. It is questionable whether they could meet the needs of the public. So there is an objective demand for these venues, and there is an urgent need to create space for them. So I suggest that we should build more government-owned venues. Especially, we should take forward the 193 projects planned by the municipal councils pre-2000. In fact, only 6 projects are in progress, and with 9 of them partially completed. For the new East Kowloon Cultural Center, the funding application has just been approved by the Finance Committee, whereas for some other projects, they are still in the pipeline, and there is no plan for other remaining projects. Some sites are left idle, and these sites are used for short-term tenancy. I urge the government to speed up its work in this regard. The second point is to review the policy on industrial buildings. Because industrial buildings are spacious and the rent level is relatively lower, suitable for cultural and arts activities. But because of the policy in 2009, rental in industrial buildings has gone up, and because of inconsistent law enforcement action, many arts and cultural groups are forced out of these buildings. Industrial buildings seems to be the only option for cultural and arts development, and the government must review the policy on industrial buildings to meet social needs. In the short term, the government should waive the charge on the short-term waiver for using industrial building for arts and cultural purposes. In the long run, the government should relax the building height requirement of industrial buildings so that it will be easier for industrial buildings to be converted for arts and cultural use. In the long term, the definition of use of industrial buildings should be reviewed so that cultural, arts and sports facilities can take place in these industrial buildings in a safe manner. When rolling out a new round of revitalization of industrial building scheme, the government should not stifle the room for survival for cultural, arts and sports group in these industrial buildings. The third point is to make better use of vacant school premises. Well, a few days ago in the related press conference, many community organizations also expressed views on vacant community facilities such as the Mongkok Market. It's a waste of resources, and many groups would like to apply for using government-owned venues for these purposes. However, the procedures are complicated and the charges are high. $1 billion has been reserved this year to provide financial and technical support. It is believed that this problem can be resolved, but I hope that the government, in drawing up the policy, could listen to the views of the sector to make the policy more transparent so as to encourage groups to make use of these idle sites. And in the previous policy address, the government indicated that there would be more public open space for cultural and arts groups or vacant school premises. However, over the years, only one vacant school premises was converted for this purpose. I hope that there would be more support for civic organizations to apply for using vacant school premises and vacant sites so that we take a two-pronged approach to create more space for them. Point number 4, there should be more public open space open up. Exhibition of artistic and cultural exhibits could take place. Although in 1999, the government put forward the public arts program, and in a number of LCSD venues, artworks were displayed, and these artworks were made by local artists. I still think that more public spaces can be used, can be opened up, such as public passageways and corridors. There should also be space for artistic performance in public places. Well, because of management problems and nuisance, the Yaochim Mong District Council passed a motion to scrap the pedestrian precinct in Mongkok, well, such that it greatly undermines the beauty of the area, and performers are deprived of the space to give the performance. But taking this opportunity, the government should review the management policy on pedestrian precinct so that artistic performance can take place in an orderly manner in public places. Point number 5, opening up school facilities for promotion of sports development scheme. I commissioned Professor Lau to conduct a survey. The report was compiled with recommendations. In 2017, the CE announced in a policy address the opening up of school facilities for promotion of sports development scheme. And recently, there are other. Well, the scheme has been extended to make it accessible by cultural and arts groups, because only 17 sports groups were able to hold activities in 15 school premises. I think the government should do more in face of the lukewarm response by stepping up liaison with the sports groups. And in terms of rental, the government could subsidize and make up for the shortfall so as to make the scheme more popular. And the government should also subsidize schools in taking out third-party insurance to provide incentive. Number 6 is to enhance the leasing policy for government venues. Recently, the government has introduced policies to curb the recurrence of touting activities. The government should continue to monitor the situation of touting and scalping, and there should be policies formulated to curb such activities. Well, as for civic centers and community halls, these are ideal places for holding cultural activities. The multi-purpose hall at the moment has a utilization rate of 70%, and there is room for cultural arts and sports groups to make better use of the venues. However, it is not transparent as far as the system is concerned across the territory. The procedure is complex. There are a lot of constraints. The government therefore should enhance the leasing policy by relaxing certain requirements and make it more transparent, so that the groups can make use of the venues for rehearsal and for performances. Lastly, in the previous policy address, the government adopted my suggestion and stipulated in the land lease covenants to develop cinemas, and it is in progress. And previously, through land lease covenants, the government reserved the site in Aberdeen for cultural and arts development and for use by local artists. This policy can be extended. For example, small to medium arts and exhibition venues, performance venues, and bookshops, because they bear the brunt in the private sector. For example, for Mongkok market, as I mentioned, I hope that the relevant land lease covenants can be stipulated so that there will be more arts and cultural facilities in the district. Well, space is important in the development of local culture, arts, recreation, and sports. I hope that the government would heed the views of the community so that more ways would be explored to create space for such activities. I so submit, Mr. President. I put the question to you, and that is Mr. Ma Fung-kwok's motion has.
All members will move amendments to this motion. This Council would conduct a joint debate on the motion and the amendments. I will call upon the members who move the amendments to speak in the following order: Honorable Mrs. Regina IP, Honorable Tanya CHAN, Honorable Kwok-fan, and Honorable Nok-hin, but they may not move the amendments at this stage. Honorable Mrs. Regina IP. President, I speak to support Mr. Ma Fung-kwok's original motion. As the representative for the arts and culture, recreation and sports sector, that he understands that Hong Kong would need more of such spaces, and his motion had pointed comprehensively where the government shortcomings are. I've done some study myself that I found that the government institute and community use land made up of about 2.3% of the total Hong Kong land, and GSC has also included the recreational and arts site. Compared to GSC sites of Singapore, we made up of about 8% of its total lands area. So for the recreational and sports recreation space is a severe shortage, which has been pointed out by Mr. Ma, which I will not repeat here. The New People's Party in done a poll in Tongcheng North, and someone has suggested having a go-kart racetrack in Sunny Bay, and the residents there do not wish for a go-kart racetrack. Instead, they would prefer to have more recreational spaces. Even though Mr. Ma has original motion has been quite comprehensive, I just want to express my personal views on this issue. On sports, Hong Kong had a vibrant sports scene instead of the promoting sports community and promoting elite sport. The most popular sport is soccer, and now that a World Cup is ongoing, there are a lot of people are staying up late. And other kind of sports are popular as well. For example, cricket. That's welcomed by a lot of the foreigners and these ethnic minorities, and it is as this so popular among the Commonwealth nations and in Indian and Pakistanis. And on Hong Kong, we have a baseball association that will have a team that represent Hong Kong to compete elsewhere. Even though we only have a 7 million population, and our elite athletes have won honors for Hong Kong in the past for the Li Lai Shan and Li Lo Zi and Miss Ng Yi, the snooker queen. And golf is not just an elite sport as well. And President, as you might aware, Tiffany Chan, and she learned how to golf in the U.S. and she able to win championships in the varsity level and now about to turn professional. And a lot of the Hong Kong golfers have performed well globally. One of the Martin Young had won the championship at the PGA, and a 10-year-old Ariana Lau. She's apparently a Hong Konger. She also she would regarded as a golf genius, prodigy. So Hong Kong people are very keen on all sort of ball sports. I wonder have you read the newspaper today? So, besides our fencing, our player Vivian Kwong at the Bangkok Asian Championships had won a gold medal. Another Hong Kong player, 17-year-old, also won a bronze medal as well. As you can see, the sports scene and in front of elite development that been going quite well, and will require a dedicated training venues, and it will also allow the public to increase the participation and will not miss out that Hong Kong used to have a bowling championship as well. Besides urging the government to expedite the development of the sports venues, we also need to make use of different spaces. So my minor amendment is to hope that we can make better use of the public facility space within low usage. For example, the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal. Recently, our establishment committee have been scrutinizing a proposal from CEDB to extend a directory position to create more business opportunities for the cruise terminal, even though the terminal, even for the berth visit and the passengers numbers have been on the rise, and yet still plenty of space available. I discussed with the operator of the terminal, and there are plenty of space outdoors. And as you may know, there are high and low season for cruise ship visits. When there's no berthing, the pier could accommodate 8,000 to 10,000 people to hold sporting events, for example, boxing. Even though boxing is not subsidized by the government, as far as I know, that boxing is not a policy supporting sport. However, we already have Mr. Cho Shing-yu. Besides Mr. Cho, Rex Cho, and there are other young people joining the box trade. We have a female boxer that won an honors in Bangkok, and the I have someone working in office who prefer in the boxing who prefer Muay Thai is some kind of a recreation sport or professional sport, which is another channel for the young people, another pathways for the young people. Should supporting the use of a external outdoor space at post terminal to conduct more sport activities and to provide more pathways for younger generation. Due to time constraint, I will support the proposal by Mr. Ma Fung-kwok that the shopping complex could set aside spaces to develop certain cultural arts facilities like the bookshop. The previous term's chief executive urged the shopping center to provide some spaces for cinemas. I wonder if this policy can enable to provide more living space for the cinemas. As we all know that unless you talk about a sci-fi blockbuster, most of the young generation will download from Netflix or from HMV, which would be available at any time, any place. They wouldn't bother going to cinemas. What we lacked is actually bookstores. Secretary will be aware that the major bookstore would close down. It's called Pt1 last year. There will be a less and less bookstore in the shopping centers. Some parents complained to me that rather than urging to shopping centers to have cinemas, you might as well stipulate them to have bookstores and other cultural facilities to encourage reading among the younger generation. And like Mr. Ma said, the government has invested heavily on the West Kowloon Cultural District as well as the Kai-Tak Sports Park. These are the large-scale sports venues that are worthy of support. However, they will take time to complete. And yet there are other opportunities to create more space for arts and culture and recreation. I hope the government can listen to us. And I hope to provide as much such facilities as much as possible. Another interesting point raised by Mr. Ma is the use of vacant school premises. I haven't made a tally of how many vacant school premises are there. There's one way of doing it. So even though we have the Secretary of Education with us, we urge to consider for the international school. There's a international school across the road. So it's spending over $1 billion to redevelop. I know that the facilities there will come with swimming pool and gym, ball courts. A lot of the international schools have called top-notch, comprehensive facilities, and they are being subsidized in government somewhat through a land grant or even providing loan for redevelopment. They urge these schools to open up the school facilities for the less privileged members of the public to enjoy them. I so submit.
Ms. Tanya CHAN, good morning. First of all, I thank Mr. Ma Fung-kwok for moving this motion, because if you look at the wording, he said developing venues and creating room. Creating room, the word creation is very much in line with the idea of creativity and arts and culture. Now, for sports, very often we have international competitions, different awards and medals. It would be easier to gauge a performance, whereas for artists, performers, it may not be easy to strive for additional resources. Very often, they would only get resources when there is a change in the government policy. And as far as sports is concerned, we have the Kai-Tak Sports Park, and we also have WKCD, which is the major cultural facility in Hong Kong. But before the facilities are commissioned in the medium to long term, in the short term, I agree with Mr. Ma Fung-kwok that we should develop venues and create room. And as mentioned by Mr. Ma Fung-kwok in Chapter 4 of the Hong Kong Planning Standards and Guideline, there should be a sports center per 50,000 or 65,000 population. We only have 95 sports halls in Hong Kong. Not all of them are up to standard. Well, in 2017, we have 7.4 million population. That means we only have one sports center per 78,000 population, far from meeting the standard, not to mention the lack of cultural and arts facilities. Now, in 2012-2016, the first batch of cultural facilities should be commissioned in the WKCD. We're now in 2018, and we're still craning our neck to look forward to the commissioning of the first facility in WKCD. And it won't be fully commissioned until 2019. So I would say that in terms of venues for rehearsals and for performances, we are lagging far behind. I'd like to talk about recreational venues and public open spaces. As mentioned by Mr. Ma Fung-kwok, this is quite laughable. In fact, according to the HKPSG, the CN Council in 1995 conducted a survey, which is a study of leisure habits and recreation preferences. And the Hong Kong PSG's relevant guidelines are drawn up on this basis. It's been over 20 years. There hasn't been a fresh study on the matter. I hope that the government would, in a timely manner, which is a catchphrase nowadays, conduct another study of leisure habits and recreational preferences to gauge the demand, especially population planning. Back then, the issue of aging population was explored, and because of the aging population, there might be different demands for facilities and spaces. For example, many facilities in the children's playground are questionable. In fact, my friends ask me why we no longer have swing sets. And in terms of flooring material, because of the aging population, something should be done to make it more attractive for senior citizens to play sports there. So in terms of leisure and recreational activities, the government should conduct better studies to have a more accurate picture of the demand, and we should also draw reference from other cities with the problem of aging population. For WKCD, back then we objected to this project amounting to $21.6 billion. But you can see in my amendment, point number 9, I said that we should expedite the construction of outstanding facilities in WKCD because WKCD is taking up a lot of our funds. Well, supposedly the space should be co-developed by government as well as private developers, but now the government is fully taking forward its development. And if we don't provide if we do not complete construction of outstanding facilities, we are not doing justice to the place. And I discovered recently, while sitting in the subcommittee chaired by Kwok-fan, that apart from F&B retail facilities, the WKCD is proposing to build artist hostels, but it is not counted towards CGFA for hotel uses, rather for arts, cultural and arts spaces. So it is said that as long as local artists are given priority in using the facility, it should be counted as space for arts and culture. But I think that this is a trick. I hope that the government will not adopt such a way, or the authority would not adopt such a way to use hotel space as a disguise. And the other point mentioned by Mr. Ma Fung-kwok is opening up school facilities for promotion of sports development scheme. As mentioned, the response has been at most lukewarm, and I understand there are a number of concerns from schools. First of all, the schools may very well need to use the premises all the time, and they would need staff to monitor the use by organizations, so they need to keep watch of their own facilities. And there are also other issues such as insurance and security. Although the government provides subsidy to a certain level to schools for opening up their facilities for use by organizations, the subsidy, however, it doesn't seem to be sufficient. So in terms of design of the scheme and the policy, I think the government should walk the extra mile. Another point, as mentioned by Mr. Nok-hin, is about touting activities. Well, in point number 6 of my amendment, I mentioned that in terms of LCST venues, there should be more stringent policies to curb touting activities. Some swimming clubs, for example, may hog swimming lanes on a prolonged basis. Well, in fact, there are ways to stop them. For example, they would be prevented from hiring swimming lanes in certain months for commercial purposes. But for some reason, the policy has been lifted, or the ban has been lifted, so that the swimming clubs are allowed to continue its way. The high season of swimming is coming. I think the government should pay more attention to this, because there are scalpers working in syndicate, and I really think that the public would like to use the facilities, and it should not be used as a means of making money by these organizations. Another point is industrial buildings. We know that after 2016, the government approved a lot of applications, but most of these applications involved converting the space into office or hotel use. And there is little help in terms of promoting arts and culture. And because of soaring rental, many many art groups are driven away. And Mr. Jeremy Tam, well, I think Mr. Wong, Secretary, you should know that in fact Mr. Jeremy Tam has put forward some suggestions on the use of industrial buildings. For example, if the safety coefficient allows, and on the lower floors of industrial buildings, they should be opened up for arts and cultural activities, or even for use as performance venues. But finally, on the matter of private recreational leases, Mr. Kwok-fan also has moved an amendment in terms of the number of hours for use by the public. We put a question to Mr. Lau Kwong-wah. In fact, we understand that on the whole, only 30% of the hours are allocated to the public. Although it is now accessible by the public, we need to make sure that the policy is properly implemented.
Mr. Lau Kwok-fan. Thank you, President. Thank you very much, Mr. Ma Fung-kwok, for moving this motion to discuss the culture, arts, recreation, sports facilities. Hong Kong people may be busy, but they would still take time out to take part in cultural and recreational facilities. We're running out of land. This problem is not peculiar to housing. The arts and culture and sports are also suffering from the same problem. Given the tight land supply, the government is unable to meet the needs from various quarters. In the motion, Mr. Ma Fung-kwok has put forward a lot of specific measures to develop venues and creating room to support culture, arts, recreation, and sports. Without any venue, there is no room for development. My amended motion, is focused on the creation of facilities, and so on. We have been urging the administration to set up a community building fund to expedite the construction of facilities. Recently, the administration has devoted a lot of resources to promote the development of these facilities. In the policy address, $20 billion has been set aside for the 5-year plan for sports and recreation facilities, and another $20 billion for cultural venues. The members of the public and the district councils are full of support for these facilities, but it may take anything up to 10 or 8 years for them to get off the ground, and this is impeding the development in this area. During the municipal council era, there were a lot of projects that have been approved, but for some reason they have been held in abeyance. We have been pursuing the progress all these years, but with limited success. The Capital Works Reserve Fund is subject to certain limit. Any projects more than $30 million will have to be approved by the Finance Committee, but because of the sheer backlog in the Finance Committee, due to the infrastructural developments, the sports and recreation facilities will find it very hard to compete with all these infrastructural projects. And there is such a backlog in the Finance Committee, and all of these facilities will not see the light of the day. The DAB has made these suggestions before, that the SAR government should set up a community building fund so that the facilities in the local community don't have to compete with the infrastructure funding. And we're going to have a special fund to build local community facilities. And the funding process can be speeded up, and the SR facilities can get off the ground as soon as possible. The other thing is to enhance collaboration between mainland and Hong Kong. We have the Bay Area, which is not simply focused on technological and innovation development. There can be cultural and arts exchanges. We have seen an increase in this area in recent years. Local arts groups expressed a keen desire to stage performances in the mainland, but indeed that they're up against a lot of obstacles. Financial is one of them. In order to help the local arts groups to stage performances in the Bay Area in the coming 5 years, the budget has set aside $140 million for the LCSD to support local artists to stage performances in the Bay Area. And there will be recurring expenditure to the tune of $50 million per annum to foster cultural exchanges between Hong Kong and the mainland. Other than the financial issues, many of the local arts groups do not enjoy any reputation in the mainland. It would be hard for them to secure any performing venues. So I hope that the administration would take proactive measures to enter into cultural exchange agreement with the mainland cities to help the local arts groups and bridge the gap between Hong Kong and the mainland in order for them to have more performing opportunities. The other issue is the scalping problem. President, there are a lot of concerts and performances where the tickets are very much in demand. The scalpers are speculating the tickets to more than $10,000. We would expect the government to do something about the scalping problem. The ticketing system is full of loopholes. According to the public entertainment ordinance, if anybody is selling a ticket for prices higher than official prices, then it would be regarded as scalping. But this ordinance doesn't apply to the exempted public entertainment places, including the Coliseum, the Hong Kong Stadium, and Queen Elizabeth Stadium under the LCSD. And scalping activities are not regulated in these venues. We believe that the administration should conduct a review on the ticketing arrangement in the LCSD venues to curb scalping activities. The police should also take enforcement action against scalping. In the community, there are suggestions that the administration should make it mandatory for tickets to be sold under real identity. Now, these real name ticketing system may sound a good idea, but as soon as this was floated in the media, many of the performing groups have also expressed their opinions. We did consult them. There are pros and cons with regard to this proposal. Real name ticketing will curb the scalping activities and ensure that people will not be adversely affected if they want to take part in these activities. But when it comes to monitoring, there are still gray areas, like there can be sensitive personal data that might be involved. It would be hard for the venue operators to check the identity of the ticket holders. Before the government implements this proposal, it ought to listen to a wide variety of views. The government has to think it through before actual implementation. Like Ms. Tanya CHAN said, I am also referring to the private recreational leases in my amended motion. There are some doubts raised about the arrangement. The government has embarked on a consultation. There are suggestions that these venues should open up 2/3 of the time, or 30% of the time, for public use. And I'm sure that the extent of opening should be increased. As regards the actual specifics, the government has not come up with any ideas. I hope that when these private recreational lease holders are submitting their plans, they should specify the details in a way that these facilities can be opened up for public use. And there shouldn't be any opening up in a bogus way. And for the qualified organizations, the number will go up from 5,000 to 7,000, but still many members of the public would be denied any usage of the facilities. I think that the facilities should be opened up to the members of the public direct. It is an urgent task to build the stadiums and the venues. I hope the administration would have regard to members' comments, and I urge members to support my amendment. Thank you.
The Honourable Nok-hin. Morning. I thank Mr. Ma Fung-kwok for raising 7 measures to target 4 types of different spaces. Because of time constraint, I may not be able to address each of them, but I'd like to talk about the background to the identifying of sites. What kind of vision does the government have before we should tackle such a debate? Maybe Mr. Ma Fung-kwok might not want to venture into such realms. According to the Hong Kong planning standards and guidelines, with regard to the projection for cultural, arts and sports spaces, they are quite outdated. According to the version of December 2017, it just says there would not be any specified standards. It depends on the need. And as to whether there is a need is up to SHA, Mr. Lau Kong Wah, to provide views and assessment. In other words,
the administration does not face up to the need for arts and culture grounds in Hong Kong, so there are no objective standards. And now we have this mega debate of land use. But amongst the 4,800 hectares of land mentioned, you do not mention arts and culture. And in the 18 options for the public to check, you do not have one on arts and culture. Mr. Ma may put forward 7 measures, and we are moving amendments. These are just second-best choices. In other words, there is just no objective criteria. And the arts and culture sector can only go for strips of land which might become available, and they cannot have any regard for the environment in the vicinity of these strips of land. However, we have to have a good ecology before we can nurture arts and culture, and that is why I'm moving an amendment to ask the administration to stick to Hong Kong PSG in order to provide the facilities and also to make open and transparent criteria to allow the public to check and inspect whether there is sufficient provision. And in the original motion, Mr. Ma asked the administration to update the definition of industrial use so organizations can legally use industrial buildings. I think that is well meant, but you're not focusing on the issue. Arts groups which want to survive in industrial buildings, first of all, face this spatial problem. But what is more difficult is fire safety considerations. You may be able to lobby owners in order to rezone the use of the building, but then you cannot pass the fire safety barrier. As you remember, the example of hidden agenda, and we know it very well. In May last year, the Development Bureau replied to Mr. Jeremy Tam, saying that most arts groups are concerned about performance, exhibition, and other matters. But then the administration says they would like to provide service and goods and attract visitors. And that is why the Fire Services Department is concerned. And because of this, I'm moving 2 amendments. One, to expand the definition of industrial use and also to review the guidelines for fire safety. Actually, in June, in the Town Planning Board last year, the HAD says that it can look into the matter with other departments to see whether industrial buildings can be used for more purposes without compromising fire safety. The Arts Development Council is supporting 60 arts groups. Most of them are medium and small-sized, but 22 of them are now situated in industrial buildings. You might want to know why I have these figures. I was doing my own calculations. Even if my amendment is not going to be passed, I hope you will at least do something to respond to the difficulty of arts workers trying to lease land in industrial buildings. And you will then be able to show some resolve that you support this action. Number 7, in my amendment, I show concern about the mechanism of LCSD booking venues. And some people, of course, are already speculating on the use of venues. In the audit report number 55 shows that many ancillary facilities like workrooms, drill rooms, the usage rate is less than 1%. The same goes in the audit report number 65. The 5 rehearsal rooms in the music center are more often than not left idle. And the Audit Commission has shown that it's not a matter of a lack of venues, it's just that you're not putting them to the best use. The LCSD should actually release the figures of usage at its venues, and intending organizations should be able to get to know such figures so that the usage rate can be enhanced. The LCSD facilities should not be a matter of secret. Sometimes you do provide figures if you want to rezone the usage of the land, but sometimes you only provide figures for open space instead of arts and recreational grounds like badminton courts, soccer pitches, etc. That is why in number 2 of my amendment, I'm asking the administration to set up a data bank in order for the public to be able to check the use of such facilities in all 18 districts and also to provide the venues according to Hong Kong PSG. To the public, these figures matter a lot because then we can judge how a piece of land should be used. $200 billion have been assigned for building more recreational facilities, but should we go for swimming pools first, or soccer pitches, or badminton courts? You do not provide options. And the public and members will say, okay, you propose this, let's take it. But we have no way to check whether the supply is responding to demand. We need the figures in order to arrive at our own view whether your proposal is appropriate. And then we can also monitor the progress of the building of such facilities. According to the Hong Kong PSG, Hong Kong needs 72 soccer pitches. I don't know whether you know it, Secretary. Not including playgrounds, but we only have 60, meaning we lack 12. Again, we've calculated these figures ourselves. It may not be as accurate as yours. But why do we have to amass the figures ourselves? It is because you do not have this data bank, so we cannot monitor you. You talk about using big data. But in fact, first of all, please let us know the data about these grounds and figures, and let us know the figures for application and actual usage. This will also benefit your formulation of policies, and this will facilitate members in checking the usage. And then number 4 and number 10 have to do with the use of vacant or idle venues. School spaces may be one of those, but not everyone can be used because some of them have been left idle for a long time, and if people have to spend money on renovation and refurbishment, this may not be affordable by us groups, and sometimes they are not accessible. In other words, they may sound good, but they are not exactly good. And we also want them to change the short-term lease guidelines. I like to talk about the Kitchi Center, driven away by Jockey Club. It is because they have a short-term tenancy at Shak Moon, but what has happened to it? The application procedures are quite obscure. You would not list what vacant sites there are, and the groups have to discover for themselves where these vacant sites are, and then they have to make the application, and they need the support of the policy bureaus. Many people therefore criticize that most of these short-term tenancies are the subject of invitation by government. The average arts group just don't know where to look for such sites, and therefore the vacant sites are left there for unnecessary vegetation. And in fact, you have such vacant sites around Hong Kong, and you can use a system to tender for such vacant sites. And I can share you with one example. We know that there was a famous Japanese football player who joined Oriental football team, and he shared this on the Facebook. He said that because the team did not have a dedicated venue, they had to go to different venues from day to day, and there is no shampoo in the changing room. They need to bring it themselves, and then there is no locker, and they have to put everything on the car. He says it's like a secondary boy playing football, and he cannot know whether this team can be called a professional team. And this example shows that it's not that we do not have the facilities, just that you do not put your heart into doing your job.
Secretary for Home Affairs. President, grateful to Mr. Ma Fung-kwok for moving this motion, and Mrs. Regina IP, Ms. Tanya CHAN, Mr. Kwok-fan, and Mr. Nok-hin for moving the amendments. I, like members, are in favor of developing venues and creating room to support the development of local culture, arts, recreation, and sports. We support this broad direction. As regards to specifics, views that diverse, the government will be listening intently and take them on board where possible. Arts and culture and sports are the two major spheres of the Bureau. We understand how critically important land is to the development of this area. The HAB has been adopting a double-pronged approach. On the one hand, we are building cultural and recreational and sports facilities. And at the same time, we are assisting NGOs to create more space, including the creation of space in private properties and the utilization of vacant government properties and opening up of schools facilities. It is hard to find land in a community, but the government is sparing no effort to identify land to provide venues and facilities. Over the past 20 years, for instance, under the LCSD, the number of sports centers has increased from 76 to 100, swimming pools from 33 to 44, performing venues from 13 to 16, public libraries from 58 to 70. For large facilities, we are done with the redevelopment of the Victoria Park swimming pool and the Mongkok Stadium, and we are building the Tseung Kwan O Sports Ground and the Hong Kong Velodrome. The Space Museum has completed renovation last month. The Museum of Arts is going to be undergoing expansion and renovation, and it will be reopened in phases in 2019. In the coming few years, there are a number of cultural, recreational, and sports facilities that will be coming on stream. They include the Pt1 West Sports Centre coming on stream in the third quarter of this year, the sports ground near Sha Tin Chun Shek Estate in 2019, the sports centre at the West Kowloon Reclamation in 2020, the library cum five-a-side football pitch, and also the East Kowloon Cultural Centre in 2020. I'm grateful to members for earmarking funding for some of the projects, and they include the NT East Cultural Centre, the advanced work, and also the Kai Tak Avenue Park. The government is going to be setting aside $20 billion to launch the 5-year plan for sports and recreational facilities. And there will be 26 sports and recreational projects covering sports grounds, soccer pitches, sports centres, swimming pools, and open space, and so on. Also, we are conducting feasibility studies for 15 sports and recreational projects to lay the groundwork for the projects. On the side of culture, we are setting aside $20 billion for the coming 10 years to improve and increase the facilities, like the NT East Cultural Centre and the Heritage Conservation and Resource Centre. In the coming years, we will be redeveloping the Science Museum, the Museum of History, and the Hong Kong City Hall. The Cultural Centre will also be undergoing renovation. All these are intended to provide additional space and upgrade existing facilities. All the aforesaid projects and also the $40 billion set aside are an indication of the government's commitment to providing the facilities, and this is in response to Mr. Edward Lau's amendment regarding the proposal to set up a fund for facilities. Mr. Ma Fung-kwok proposed that we should deal with the projects left over from the municipal councils. There are 139 projects involved. 98 have already or almost completed. 12 have been started, and we will follow up on these. We'll seek the support of the members of the public, district councils, and LegCo. We will respond to questions and get started with the projects as soon as possible. Other than the LCSD venues, I must mention the WKCD and the Kai Tak Sports Park. Both projects are of world-class scale. Upon completion, the facilities will be open to the public. The CG Centre at the WKCD, the Arts Park, free space, and also the Lyric Theatre Complex, and they will be coming on stream one after another, and there will be performing venues of different sizes and for diverse needs. I must respond to Ms. Tanya CHAN regarding the WKCD. The WKCDA has never given up on the development of Batch 3 facilities. Under the enhanced financial arrangement, the WKCDA will give priority to the music center. For the rest of the facilities, under the organic growth arrangement, the WKCDA will decide on the appropriate timing. Sports facilities. The Kai-Tak Sports Park will provide sophisticated facilities for the members of the public, as well as to stage international mega events. There will be a large area designated for parks and outdoor facilities, and there will be a lot of ample open space for the members of the public. The government realizes that different arts groups would have different modes of operation, and they need diversified venues. The HAB has been promoting tripartite collaboration among government, business, and the community. We are converting vacant schools for use as art space, and also including in the condition of land sale areas specifically for arts and culture purposes. In the fourth quarter of 2014, the HAB has earmarked additional funding for the Arts Development Council to develop on a tripartite basis in Wong Chuk Hang the ADC Art Space Scheme with 17 studios. And the HAB also supported the Taipo District Council in cooperation between TPDC and ADC to convert the school into an arts center. There will be venues for there are 21 studios and multi-purpose rooms and music rooms. The conversion will be completed by the end of 2018. In 2016, as part of the land sale conditions in Aberdeen, the government specified that the floor space should be set aside for arts and culture purposes. Under the condition, the developer has to develop, design, and build the art space in accordance with the technical schedule. Through the ADC scheme, we will allow the artists to rent the studios and exhibition halls at below market rate. And all these projects will be completed in 2022. Furthermore, the Chief Executive, in her policy address, referred to the tripartite space sharing scheme for youth. This is a platform for owners of revitalized industrial buildings and commercial buildings to contribute floor space for co-working space and studios. Through the ADC's liaison, some of the revitalized units that have been rented and offer them for rent at below market rent to the artists. There are 3 performing studios that have been available. They have become available in Guntong, and application is being received starting from May. There is a keen demand for space on the part of the performing artists and also the performing groups. There are some suggestions that the government should offer a waiver for the landlords who are willing to convert the units into studios, and the fees should also be waived. The government is looking at the fire safety and building safety and allow the performing groups and artists to make use of the vacant industrial buildings. As regards the waiver, we are working in collaboration with the Development Bureau. We are happy to listen to further views from members regarding the use of industrial buildings. The government is assisting sporting associations to take full advantage of landfills as sporting facilities. We have 3 such examples: the Xunwan landfill driving range, the BMX park at Drinker Bay landfill, and also the shooting range at the Pillar Point Valley landfill. The cricket center and the soccer center at Drinker Bay landfill and Zhengguano landfill are being under construction, and they will be available for public use sometime this year. Mr. Ma Fung-kwok suggested that schools be opened up as facilities. The EDB and HAB have launched the opening up school facilities for promotion of sports development scheme, and additional resources will be devoted to promote the opening up of schools. There are 17 sports associations that have organized 45 different activities covering basketball, badminton, volleyball, and so on. 2,200 people have benefited from that. We have learned from our experience and fine-tuned the fees and charges in order to encourage more schools and sporting associations to take part. Turning now to arts and culture, in her policy address in 2017, the chief executive indicated that the government would support the cooperation between ADC and arts groups. The HAB has set aside resources. We have put together a partnership scheme between schools and arts groups for arts activities to be organized on a joint basis. And schools are also made available for creation and rehearsal. Turning to touting, the LCSD reviews on a regular basis the booking procedures and allocation mechanism to guard against abuses. The department has been monitoring the problem of touting activities. We have improved the booking system and put in place a penalty arrangement and step-up enforcement action against the touting activities. Starting from the 6th of February, the LCSD has introduced the Leisure Link e-service system. If there is a cancellation of booking, this session would be posted on the web, departmental web, before it would be made available through the LES on a first-come, first basis, so nobody would be able to transfer the cancelled session without any authorization. The LCSD has launched 2 anti-touting measures on the 20th of June 2018, including the turf soccer pitch balloting system and also the cancellation of the fee collection for those who are making booking on somebody else's behalf. We will adopt more measures to make sure that the resources are allocated to the public fairly. Perhaps I pause here. I will listen to members' comments and suggestions. I'm going to make a response again. Thank you.
Secretary for Development. President, I'd like to thank Mr. Ma Fung-kwok for moving the motion, Mrs Regina IP, Ms Tanya CHAN, Mr. Edward Lau, and Mr. Nok-hin for moving amendments. The Development Bureau will continue to support the HA Bureau in planning for land and resources for developing arts and culture. According to planning for the different areas, according to the Hong Kong PSG, we will look at population, arts, culture, and other facilities and the supply situation in order to provide such facilities, and then the departments will be taking up the projects in their jurisdiction. Mr. Lau Kang-wah has already detailed the work of the HA Bureau in providing more venues. The Development Bureau, together with our departments, will continue to work alongside the HA Bureau in order to create more room for arts and culture development. Here I must mention that at the harbourfront and also energizing Kowloon, we have done something. The CE said in the PA released last year that we should make the best use of the harbourfront in order to create more room for public space and also arts and culture. Starting from 2014, we have leased out 3.6 hectares harbourfront space in the central area to private organizers to hold activities like International Arts Expo, popular music festivals, e-formula races, marathon, and also outdoor classical music appreciation sessions. And a total of 500 or 5 million people have participated in these activities. And as for long-term harborfront planning, we are doing the Wan Chai and North Point harborfront urban design study, and we will be looking into design concepts like harbor performance zones and water sports and recreation theme zones. And as you know, we are now redeveloping the Kwun Tong Chun Yip Street playground, and we are going to provide multi-purpose performance venues. And also there will be another multi-purpose venue in another development area. The Energizing Hong Kong or East Kowloon office is now making plans for the two action areas in Kowloon Bay and Kwun Tong, and we are doing planning and engineering feasibility studies, and we are looking into providing arts and culture uses in these areas. As for private development projects, we will include these conditions in order to ask them to reserve space for arts and culture. Normally, to provide public space and arts and culture facilities in private developments has the purpose of promoting an integrated design, the best use of land, and also a better planning for public facilities. As for such developments, in 2011 we issued the relevant guideline proposing that owners and management companies should, as long as possible, to provide reasonable and flexible use of land in order to provide for arts and culture in private developments. And of course, in the guideline, it also stipulates how these can be applied for. As for reserving floor space for arts and culture in private developments, Mr. Lau already talked about a piece of land sold in Aberdeen in 2016. We are in fact looking at a site to be sold to the west of Kai Tak Station Square. We are asking the developer to provide a floor area of 11,600 square meters, out of which 60% must be used for arts and culture and performance. And also, in vacant government land now managed by the Lands Department and which can be applied for by NGOs, well, we have issued such a list to the geographical information map of the Lands Department website. These sites have been left vacant for very long, and they need to be redecorated before they can be used. Therefore, in the 2018-19 budget, we have put aside $1 billion to provide subsidy for capital works and also building services for eligible projects. And we will be providing technical advice to government departments and organizations which like to use such spaces. And in response to Mr. Ma Fung-kwok's invitation, we have conducted briefing about this conceptual idea to the industry, and we are thinking of making a report to the development panel in the second half of the year, and from then on we will be applying for funding to do it. As for industrial building, we like to make the best use of the space without compromising public safety, in order that there can be more flexible use of industrial buildings. If there are arts and culture and creative industries which do not involve direct provision of services and goods, we have already expanded the definition of industry, other specified uses, annotated business, and residential e-purposes. Well, these will become always permitted uses. The Town Planning Board in June last year approved the use, which is art studio bracket excluding those involving direct provisions of service or goods bracket, in order that this will become always permitted uses. As Mr. Lau said, as of May this year, there are 20 outline zoning plans which have been updated according to this new definition. We'll be making other consequential amendments to other OZPs when the occasion arises. The administration is also looking into how we can further encourage owners to redevelop or convert the entire industrial building so that we can provide legal and safe operating space for potential industries, including arts and culture. And we will be listening to members before I will speak again. Thank you.
Mr. Vincent Chang. Thank you, President, and thank you for the Secretary's replies. As my friends know, I'm a sport enthusiast. I might not have the physique of a professional athlete. However, I still have the sportsmanship spirit to lobby for the health to sports voucher and fighting for more sports venue. Speaking of the sports voucher, even I discuss with secretaries every time. They replied that it was a good proposal, that there's a shortage of facilities. After launching this voucher will encourage more people to use the facility, which will aggravate the shortage. I think we are turning the outcome into the cause. So today I wish to thank Mr. Ma's original motion to creating more venues for sports facilities. Since we do have an immense demand. So now that the World Cup has just kicked off, then the whole town is in soccer fever. Besides watching the games on the sidelines, we like to set foot in the field. And so a lot of friends will hope to make a booking on the LCST booking system. Well, let's say, is there any soccer field available within 10 days? It turned out that none of them are available. Maybe on the weeknights in Kowloon Bay, there's about a slot or an hour or so. So it's simply pouring cold water. Right. So no wonder that there are a lot of venue touting activities. However, this is one of the reluctant ways to address the shortage. So how do we boost the supply of the venues who will be most critical? And Secretary, the HAB had mentioned and that's a 5-year plan for the development of sports facilities, about a 20 billion subsidy, and the Finance Committee have approved a few batch of subsidies, and yet the construction have been at a glacial pace, especially the Moses Park proposal that I've just approved the FC. So looking back at the document, that when the conversion of the Moses pool have been proposed by the DAB back in 2007, and the HAB come up with the drawings and stuff that was approved by FC. So upon completion, it will be 2022. So it will take about 15 years. So retrofitting a swimming pool into a heated pool would take 15 years. To many people, that would be simply baffling. And some residents have told me that can we retrofit the cemetery pool into a heated pool? I told them, do you mind wait the pool to be closed for 4 years? It seems that the speed is way too slow. So for the preliminary works, can we expedite it so that to minimize the administrative procedures? For our works to be carried over a decade or so, is the public could hardly understand. And the administration may view that the LegCo will spend too much time on scrutinizing the funding proposals. Well, in terms of some of the funding proposal, the estimate will be too expensive. So they usually come in over hundreds of millions. We can't just rubber stamp all of them. So within the Assumption Board District Council, I tried to replace the clock on the swimming pool, and I got a quotation of over 300,000. So how does it make sense of this kind of prices? So thus this whole matters was dragged on for too long. Some other colleagues mentioned that we have this Hong Kong Planning Center in guidelines. For every 50,000 people, there should be a sports center. For 30,000 people, there should be a 7-a-side soccer field. For 10,000 people, there should be a basketball court. In Changsha 1, I see that there are a lot of housing estate being completed. There will be an influx of 80 to 100,000 people. So how crowded would the Changsha 1 sports ground become? So can we improve our planning so as to tie in with the community development to ensure there's sufficient venues? Besides on the speed of construction, a lot of colleagues have raised a point on the using vacant school premises. In some shape, we have a lot of vacant school premises. We discussed with the EDB, can we actually to inspect them. So these repeated requests, they only actually they were very so cautious that wouldn't let them touch anything. They just want to have a venue for playing basketball. But who can explain why it's been left idle for a few years? And secretaries replied that there's a new program to encourage the schools to open up their facilities for the sports program and courses. This is a good thing. However, there are 130 schools willing to lend out their premises, but at the end, only 17 sports associations applied. It seems that the outcome is unsatisfactory. It claims that upon review, hopefully there will be improvement. So I have high hopes for that. I'm sure there's a great room for improvement. And finally, President, I'll speak on my proposed sports voucher, even though the Bureau had nixed the idea many times and replied that the government had already offered subsidy. And I found out that every year they only allocate $200 to $300 per person, which is way below the amount for the sports budget I proposed. So there's still a lot of work to be done in this regard. I know that the two secretaries are committed persons. I know that Mr. Lau is a avid sport lover and an avid ping pong player. We have room for sports promotion in the future. I think sport is not only good for our health, it's also be good for our mental well-being. I hope that the Brewers can make up the shortfall to make future effort for the future generation. Mr. Dr. Kwok. The aim of the Ma Fung-kwok's original motion is to urge the government to developing more venues and to further support development of local arts and culture scene. I'm sure that members, irrespective of political affiliation, will support this. The public's demand for arts and culture recreation facilities is on the rise, and yet the usage of these facilities has reached close to saturation. The supply and demand imbalance have become an important barrier to the development of local culture, recreation, and sports. The BEC is of the view that to address this will require short, medium, and long-term policy measures. On short-term measures, the administration should make good use of idle sites and premises, especially of the idle land that have yet to have a long-term planning. The administration should proactively consider the stakeholders to lease them out for cultural and recreation. So, for example, a 60 hectares site in the Sunny Bay have been set aside for the extension for Disneyland, for the idling for use. The society regarded that since the Disneyland had not have any long-term development program, need to consider all sort of short-term use, including use it for arts and culture and recreational purpose. The press reported and some organizers trying to submit the proposal through the STT to develop into a floral garden and to introduce the concept of floral tourism to enhance the overall competitiveness of our tourism sector. I think this proposal is worthy our support. The stakeholders should facilitate the implementation of this concept. At the same time, the administration could enhance the existing cultural arts recreation facilities booking mechanism in order to deter venue touting activities. For a short, medium, and long term, should accelerate the implementation of the large-scale venues. And myself and the other BAE members have been urging the government to promote the sports in Hong Kong, as will support the funding the Kai Tak Sports Park proposal. And for the 25 billion Kai Tak Sports Park had commenced construction in 2016. It should come put into service in 2021. By then, we have international scale mega events to promote the development of the tourism industry. For the cultural activities, as the Finance Committee in 2008 have approved a one-batch provision of 1.6 billion, the WKCD will be developed in batches that would put together an arts and cultural facilities under one single precinct. I must declare that I'm the director of the WKC board and with no pecuniary interest. The first phase works of WKC, including the M Plus Pavilion and the CHU Center, some which will be completed will be commissioned within the next few years, and the second batch of facilities has commenced the instructions. I hope the administration can accelerate the construction of the third batch of culture facilities. And having fancy hardware is not enough. They will need to have supporting measures as well. On May 29th, the Palace Museum of WKC have commenced the groundbreaking ceremony, and should be completed in the upper half of the 2022. It had the blessing and the support of the central government. The museum would have a showcase of natural treasures, and last year when the presidency's visit to Hong Kong had witnessed the signing of an agreement between WKCD and the Beijing Palace Museum. HKJC have donated 35 billion to the construction cost. And Carrie Lam point out emphatically, and the Palace Museum have met into trouble, even been troubled by judicial challenges and in the politically charged atmosphere. Unfortunately, the hurdles have been cleared and were able to fulfill the mission of the Palace Museum to build a comprehensive museum embodying with Hong Kong characteristics. The administration should expedite the 2030 plus planning and study update. As we all know, that Hong Kong has acute land shortage, would affect the housing supply and the supply for commercial industrial land. However, we can't be short-sighted and even prevent throwing short-term fixes. The Task Force on Land Supply has begun the second round of public engagement exercise. One of the major point of controversy would be the Fan Ling Golf course and whether it should be resumed for housing. And Hong Kong has a sizable population of golf enthusiasts, with the young people keen to take the sport. And the Hong Kong government had insufficient support for the sport. There will be a lack of venues with lesser practice range. And the golf course with high ecosystem value is started to be demolished, and it would be a very short-sighted suggestion and would polarize the society, and actually be ironic as counterproductive towards the aim of this motion. And I want to stress to the government that Hong Kong should enhance its land supply, but also take into account of a diversified direction to implement new developed areas, to have appropriate reclamations outside Victoria Harbour, to develop the agricultural land and fringes of Country Park, to build a long-term land bank, to modulate the land supply, to ensure that balance the needs of a short to medium-term land supply, and as well as to certain balance with different land uses to cater for the housing issues, as well as to cater for the implementation of the provision of sports and recreation venues. So submit. Mr. Yu Shi-wing.
Mr. President, in the eyes of the public, culture and arts could stimulate creativity and help build a quality living environment. From the economic point of view, it can also boost tourism and consumption. There are points that the government should consider. For example, different kinds of cultural and arts exchange tours with places outside Hong Kong, and the other activity is concerts. Well, at the moment, we do not have sufficient venues for these two types of activities. With improvements in the living standards of Hong Kong and drop in birth rate, parents are concerned not only about their children's well-being, but their capabilities in their development, including arts and culture. Schools very often would work with different organizations outside Hong Kong to organize performances and cultural exchange tours. And there have been more and more such exchanges in the communities in recent years. Hong Kong is a metropolis with very accessible transport system, and we have organizations that have enjoyed very good reputation and are welcomed by overseas counterparts. And according to the news, there has been a stronger demand in such exchange tours, such as exhibition and arts and cultural exchange, and very often years planning in advance would be necessary, including the identification of performance venues. Whether or not we can build more venues would affect all these activities planning, including transportation and other arrangements. In the past, some exchange tours had to go somewhere else outside Hong Kong because we had insufficient venues, causing disappointment among our youths as well as their parents. It also undermines our image as an international city, and it also undermines our competitiveness. According to the LCSD, we have only 15 performance venues, but there are more and more applications for use. Between 2012 and 2015, over 8,000 applications failed to be allocated with a slot for performance. But we reckon most of the applications had to do with applications for use during peak seasons, such as weekends and holidays. I suggest that in order to allow more opportunities for our young people to go on exchange tours, apart from building more exhibition and competition venues, we should consider drawing up priority policies for outbound exchange tours. For example, some venues should be allocated for priority booking by these exchange organizations, because these venues have a better audiovisual systems, and we need to safeguard our image. Apart from that, the government should also pay attention to large-scale performance venues. According to a survey commissioned by the Hong Kong Polytechnic University Department of Tourism and Hotel Management, 78% of tourists responding to the survey said that they would be interested to go to a concert in Hong Kong. And I believe that we have celebrities in Hong Kong that are very popular in the mainland and in Asia. We have professional publicity management and artist management experience, and we have been holding a lot of concerts. We have the experience, and that is why we are popular. According to the report, the largest performance venue at the moment only have a seating capacity of 14,000, lagging behind other neighboring cities such as Seoul and Taipei. And if we could build an indoor performance venue with a capacity of 35,000, it would give a boost to the records industry and the tourism industry. And it is estimated to bring $5 billion of economic benefits and also 16,000 jobs. So holding musical concerts would be a very potential, a business with good potential. Well, it is expected that the next venue will come on stream in 2022. At the moment, we rely only on the Hong Kong Coliseum and Asia World Expo, and the Group May Day recently held a concert in the open space of Disneyland. It was a good experience, but holding a concert means going through a lot of procedures with different departments for licenses. And in the past, some concerts had to be cancelled or postponed because the license was not approved. So I hope that the government would facilitate the application of such performance licenses and would streamline the procedures and give clear guidelines so as to help organizations apply for performance licenses, so as not to stifle our room for holding outdoor large-scale concerts in Hong Kong. Mr. Frankie Yik. On behalf of the Liberal Party, I speak in support of Mr. Ma Fung-kwok's motion. I need to declare, first of all, that I am an office holder of the Hong Kong Theatre. In order to align ourselves with the world, to build ourselves as an arts and cultural hub, the Liberal Party believes that Hong Kong needs to create space and develop venues to support the development of local culture, arts, recreation, and sports. I recall at the beginning of this year, on behalf of the Hong Kong Theatre, I participated in a consultation session in the preparation of budget. Basically, there were 3 requests from the organizations attending the consultation session. First of all, there should be more funding to support the development of arts and culture. Second, there should be more performance venues for training, for rehearsal and performances. Third, there should be more kinds of subsidies to assist the performance of troops. I'd like to focus on point number 2 about the need for venues for rehearsals, training. First of all, we need to make use of vacant school premises. Hong Kong is a small place, and there is a keen demand for these idle venues for smaller art troupes. They have all along been striving for the use of vacant school premises for rehearsals and for their creative work. There are 183 vacant school premises as of the end of 2015, but most of the school premises are dilapidated. Although in the 2018-19 budget, the government has earmarked $1 billion for the repairing of such vacant school premises, but apart from that, more resources should be deployed so that these venues can be converted into spaces suitable for training and for performances. Some of these vacant school premises have very poor accessibility. So in terms of the transport network accessibility and the location of these vacant school premises, the government should do better planning so that they could be put to better use to address the problem of shortage of venues. At the same time, the government can also work with civic organizations by upgrading or converting community halls. For example, the Chan Hing Community Hall in Marble Road in North Point can be revamped so as to create more performance venues. The government can make use of idle sites for interested parties in the sector to develop the culture and arts industry. Because around the world there are a lot of private foundations and trusts that have successfully revitalized idle sites into creative bases. And the Contemporary Art Museum of Shanghai is actually a conversion from a factory, and this is the first contemporary art museum in China, in Moscow. An art museum, a dilapidated power plant is converted into an art museum, and there should also be opening up of facilities, school facilities for sports activities. I think this is in a good direction, but in the long run, the schools should also open up their school halls and outdoor playgrounds for hire by other sports associations. In the long run, I think the government should review the policy on revitalization of industrial buildings. In recent years, enforcement action is taken on breach of land leases, and because of inconsistent definitions, some organizations receive warning letters and some organizations have to close down their business. In fact, these groups need safe safe space to undertake the creative work, and they do not pose any fire hazard. Well, the Liberal Party hopes that the government would expedite the study on using lower floors of industrial buildings for non-industrial uses to avoid wasting resources. At the same time, some floors of industrial buildings can be rented by the government for reletting to arts and cultural groups, so that the performance troops can make use of the lower floors of industrial buildings, so that we can help these troops with with rental, and we can make good use of the space, so that the ecology in industrial buildings can be improved. We need creative people to undertake the development of the industry, and the government should set up an interdepartmental group to formulate effective policies to improve the communication mechanism, so as to promote the development of the creative industries in Hong Kong. And there should also be support for all sorts of outbound cultural exchange tours.
Mr. Tony CHAN. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Madam Deputy, as we all know, Hong Kong is suffering from acute shortage of land. We were running out of cultural and sporting venues. To address this land scarcity problem is not easy. And given the land scarcity, is it impossible for us to satisfy our demand for culture, arts and culture? Hong Kong has been labeled as a cultural desert, not because there is a lack of culture, it's just because there is no room for arts and culture to thrive. There is a perennial problem of venue shortage for the small-sized and organizations that lack support. They don't have any venue for performance and for rehearsal. In Hong Kong, there are 1,400 industrial buildings, 370 or so are under single ownership. Most of them are more than 30 years. Industrial activities in Hong Kong have been in decline, and gradually more and more industrial buildings are lying vacant. And there is a gap in the arts and culture sector. When the government revitalized industrial buildings, the government stated that the industrial buildings can be used for arts and cultural development purposes. But 6 years on, the policy has not revitalized the arts and culture. It has instead pushed up the rental, and many of these groups have to vacate, and they see their dream dashed. And as a result, it is the recreational centers that can afford the rental that are moving in. I support the idea of creating more space for arts and culture. In terms of revitalization of industrial building, I don't think that we should just waive the premium, because this would benefit only the landlords. We should mandate that certain floor space be set aside and rent to the government at nominal rent, and then the government can rent them to the arts and groups. That would regulate the rent without affecting the rest of the buildings. As time goes by, the industrial buildings cannot be mentioned in the same breath as in old days. The restrictions on industrial buildings should be relaxed, and there should be a new definition for them. I hope that the administration would have regard to the social needs. According to the existing ordinance, art studios cannot provide any goods and services. Interest groups, talks, and so on, because that would increase the flow of people and increase the fire safety hazards. I think as long as they fulfill the fire safety regulation, that the government should relax the requirements in the land lease. In terms of town planning, there should be a relaxation of the restrictions to allow the creative industry and other emerging industries to take advantage of the industrial buildings in a lawful manner to meet the supply and demand. The cultural facilities and can admit of more flexibility. We do have land that can be made available to meet the burning needs. The Kai Tak old airport site has been lying fallow for more than 2 decades. It was in 2012 that there was a residential site that was made available, the Kwok-fan Park, 25 hectares. In 2000, it has completed renovation, and it has yet to be open to the public. It's been lying vacant for 17 years, and the Director of Audit reprimanded the department on 2 occasions. We have the eastern portion, 60 hectare site next to the Disneyland. It is the size of 5 Hong Kong stadiums. The government set aside this plot of land for the second development of the Hong Kong Disneyland. This has been lying vacant for 9 years. Earlier, I put an oral question at the beginning of this year. I'm pleased to see that the government has taken some action, and it is going to be turned into a floral garden. I'm pleased to hear this development. Instead of having this lying vacant, it would be a good idea to turn this into some particular use. Now, given the fact that Disneyland is running at a loss, I'm wondering whether the government should take back the land for development as arts and culture facilities. There are some sites that the government has plans for the future. If there are no plans for the vacant site, the government can lease them to the cultural organizations on a short-term basis. I feel regrettable that the land is lying vacant like that. The government should be adopting a positive attitude to make full use of the vacant sites, and that would address the need of land scarcity on the part of the cultural sector. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Thank you, Madam Deputy. This motion covers a broad spectrum. It covers the local arts and culture, recreational and sports development. In my 7 minutes, I'm going to focus my attention on arts development. And in this area, I like to focus on visual arts. Now, Mr. Lau, you probably realize that I've been supporting the cultural development and sports development. The local artists are subject to certain space constraint. It's not just a physical constraint, but also a developmental constraint. Visual arts and
Pak Mai Hong,
and installation arts, Christie's and Sotheby. In the spring and autumn auctions have brought about tremendous economic benefits to Hong Kong, and they have attracted a lot of visitors to Hong Kong. Now, for these 2 auction houses, they have 3 headquarters in New York, London, and Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is one of the largest auction centers in Asia. Now, for a sophisticated artist, he or she must have the agent to act on his or her behalf. Now we are talking about how we can assist the local artists to promote their activities. In terms of visual arts and installation art, they can cover a broad range of items. They need two types of venues. The first one is the venue for creation. The second is the venue for exhibition. A moment ago, a lot of my fellow colleagues mentioned the limited space in Hong Kong. The space for creative activities. There was mention of vacant school sites. In 2016, June, between 15 and 16, there were 234 vacant school premises, and 105 of them are still not put to any particular use. These vacant school premises are in a state of disrepair, and a lot of them are not particularly accessible. If we can identify suitable venues, I hope that the government can make available these vacant school premises to the visual artists and installation artists for them to use as studios. Second, exhibition venue. I'm sure other than the high-end events at the Wan Chai Exhibition Center, the local artists would find it very difficult to exhibit their works. If the Development Bureau can state in the lease condition that certain open space should be set aside for local artists to showcase their products and also their works, it would be a good idea. There are some business sector, some business people who are doing that, but it's nowhere near enough. Also, recently, I visited the Sun Yat-sen Heritage Trail. They reopened one, and there are some new exhibits that are on show, and this is a very, very successful. This idea can be replicated from central to other suitable locations so that the local artists can showcase their works. The other thing is the vacant sites, this government site, the central market under the stewardship of URA is undergoing some development. We're not sure about the way forward. Now, with such a vast piece of land, isn't it right for us to turn this into an art space? There are many artists who do need an exhibition area to showcase their works. Opposite the central market, about 50 meters away, there is a whole block that is designed as some kind of art gallery, and this is a very attractive notion. Other than the physical space, the artists will need some room for development. Unfortunately, we don't have the Secretary for Education here. That the two auction houses are very successful because they've attracted a lot of young people to become part of this industry as executive and as artists. But in universities in Hong Kong, I don't see any courses and the programs that are available to Hong Kong students, and many have to venture overseas for education in this area. The young kids and the Hong Kong people indeed have to respect the products. If we want to conserve the installation art and the art pieces, we have to make sure that people respect these art pieces. We have a lot of tax concessions for innovation and technology, but what about taxation or concession for the artists? At least for the first 3-5 years, they should be exempted from the profits tax. The FS have visited Ireland. Other than innovation, they are famous for their art. they do have a lot of artists who are enjoying some tax concessions from the government. I hope the government should take a leaf out of their book and offer some tax concessions for the up-and-coming artists in Hong Kong.
梁志祥議員。
The Honourable Leung Chi-chang. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Here I'd like to thank Mr. Ma Fung-kwok for moving the motion on developing venues and creating room to support the development of local culture, arts, creation and sports. Well, this is not a new topic, is it? We have talked about that many times in the past. Those who care about local arts, culture, recreation and sports have spoken a lot on this. Just now, the two policy secretaries spoke in response to the motions and amendment motions. Well, I can see that the administration has done a lot. It has identified venues. It has made many policies. But is that enough? Mr. Ma Fung-kwok is saying that no, it is not enough. And we'd like to offer our wisdom to make proposals to you. In fact, when we talk about large-scale sports and culture venues, we have the West Kowloon Cultural District and the Kai Tak Sports Complex. They are yet to be completed. Well, people call them white elephants, but if they can be completed and commissioned, I'm sure it will bring a new era to Hong Kong in sports and recreation, and they will become Asia famous. The large-scale events, of course, have to be taken up by the administration, but what about smaller venues? What else can we do? Let me give you an example. Mr. SHA, do you know that in the districts there are theaters and performing venues? 2 days ago, there was a kindergarten graduation ceremony, and I got to know this new policy. Graduation ceremonies were not regarded as a priority. They therefore could not find any space for holding the graduation ceremony. It's not just arts. I'm talking about other ordinary facility activities which are also trying to secure venues. There is a community hall in every district. Is not enough, and the population threshold for the provision is 100,000 population. Again, that is not good enough. I'd like to hear from the administration whether you have any policies to enhance facilities for the districts. And of course, we are talking about also land provision for homes for the elderly and for housing. This is our concern, and is not an easy task to accomplish. I can therefore understand why Mr. Ma is saying that we should make the best use of vacant school premises and existing school premises. You are saying that classrooms and halls in schools after school hours should be for the public to use. Is that a feasible policy? I remember when Tin Shui Wai was called a besieged city, district councillors proposed that we should open up schools and libraries for the public to use. And indeed, some schools did that. A particular school organized a community library, and many residents were able to go inside and borrow books. But not all schools are doing it. Even government schools are not doing it. We don't have the Secretary for Education here, and the two secretaries may not be able to mobilize the government schools for them to be opened up. How can we put district resources to the best use? So popular arts, popular sports can use these venues for promotion. From my angle, I think this is a worthy policy for pursuit. The administration, of course, is helping so-called elite sports, but I'm talking about popular sports. the community halls are sought after by schools, and there are community operatic groups which invite me to officiate at their performances, meaning that they already use up the venues. Therefore, in terms of venue policy, the administration should now refresh its policy and allow popular activities to take place in districts. Remember back in 2011, we organized the Arts Corridor, Arts Sculpture Corridor in Tin Shui Wai. At that time, we had the District Minor Works funding, and we were able to build facilities important and desired by the public. The Art Sculpture Corridor was able to invite artists from 5 countries to come to Hong Kong to make sculptures on site, and schools were invited to come and witness the creative process. But there is no policy for this. At that time, we had the minor works funding, which was used for this activity in a park, and so the sculptures could be exhibited there, and they're still there. If you can have public-private partnership to allow the exhibition of arts in our parks, well, I think that would be an important policy and measure. I hope Mr. Lau can introduce this into different districts in a gradual manner so we can make the best use of such venues to benefit the public. Thank you. Mr. Gary Fan. Thank